first thing the investigator asked me was, "Do you believe your sister is telling the truth about her injury?" And I didn't answer right away, because I already knew she was. "I'm Lauren, 35, and I work as a claims adjuster for a mid-sized insurance company in Ohio. I've seen every type of fraud imaginable: fake car crashes, made-up hospital stays, even people staging break-ins on their own homes. But I never thought I'd be on the other end of it, not with my own family. My sister Nicole is 32. She's always been the kind of person who treats consequences like suggestions. Growing up, she'd fake being sick to skip school, cry her way out of traffic tickets, and borrow money from me that somehow never made it back. After our mom passed away 3 years ago, we drifted apart. I paid for most of the funeral. She promised to pay me back once her business took off. It never did. Last year, Nicole got into a minor car accident. Nothing serious. Someone rear-ended her at a stop sign. No injuries were reported at the scene, and the damage to her car was barely visible. But a month later, she told me she was suing for severe back injuries and chronic pain. I remember she said it casually over lunch, like she was telling me about a new nail color. I asked her, "Nicole, are you really hurt?" She just smirked. "Let's just say my lawyer thinks the other driver's insurance company will settle quick. Easy money." That sentence stuck in my head for months. Fast forward to last February, I get a voicemail from an unknown number. A man's voice says, "Hi, Lauren, this is Detective Evans from Midwest Claims Investigation. I'd like to speak with you about your sister Nicole's claim." My stomach dropped, not because I was guilty of anything, but because I knew, right then, Nicole had gone too far. When I called him back, he was professional but firm. He said he had been hired by the opposing insurance company to verify the legitimacy of Nicole's injury. He had evidence that didn't line up with her statements, security footage, timestamps, receipts, and he said something that made my hands go cold. "Your sister listed you as an emergency contact on her medical paperwork. I figured you'd have insight into her condition." I didn't know what to say. My voice came out thin when I asked, "What exactly do you need to know?" He told me Nicole had claimed she was unable to walk without assistance, that she couldn't drive, couldn't lift more than 5 pounds, couldn't sit upright for long periods. But he had surveillance of her 2 weeks ago, carrying shopping bags out of Target, jogging lightly across a parking lot, bending to tie her shoe. Then he said, "We also found records that she started a yoga class 3 days after filing her disability paperwork." I closed my eyes. That was Nicole, always one step too confident. He asked if I believed she was capable of faking something like this. I wanted to lie, I really did. But I just said, "Yes, she's done stuff like this before, not this big, but yeah, she could." That's all it took. 2 weeks later, Nicole called me sobbing. She said her case was falling apart, that the insurance company was threatening to press charges for fraud, and that someone had betrayed her. I didn't say anything. She screamed, "It was you, wasn't it? You told them." I didn't tell her anything, not directly, but my silence was enough. She hung up, and I haven't seen her since. A few days later, I got a copy of a legal notice. Apparently, the settlement had been canceled, and she was under investigation for false statements and document forgery. She falsified a doctor's note. She'd even photoshopped a hospital invoice for pain management sessions. When I think about it now, it's not even the fraud that disturbs me the most. It's how natural it came to her. How she looked me in the eye and said, "Easy money," like she'd earned it. Our dad called me last month. He's been trying to get Nicole to come clean. She's moved back in with a friend, lost her job, and told everyone that I ruined her life. Dad asked me if I could just forgive her. "She's family, Lauren. She's struggling." I told him I forgave her a long time ago, but forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. Here's the part that keeps me up at night. I think Nicole wanted to get caught. She's always lived in extremes, chaos, drama, pity. She doesn't know how to live quietly. And when things got too calm, she made her own storm. The investigator called me again last week, just to let me know the case was closing soon. He thanked me for being honest. I told him I didn't feel proud of any of it. He said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the only way to save someone is by not saving them. I didn't respond. I just sat there in silence, staring at the family photo on my desk, me, Nicole, and Mom, taken years ago at a fair. Nicole's smiling in it like she always did, like she could talk her way out of anything. I kept thinking how that smile used to mean mischief. Now it just looks like a warning. Next story. When my brother Mark asked, "Can you help me get this business off the ground?" I said yes without hesitation. I'm 32, work in logistics management, and live in Austin. Mark's 2 years younger. He's always had ideas but never enough structure to make them work. His latest one was a landscaping business, trucks, lawn care, and small construction contracts. He had the skills but no credit and no savings. I had both. We met at my kitchen table one evening with his rough business plan printed out. He said, "If you invest 10 grand, I can buy the equipment and pay you back in 6 months." I told him I wasn't interested in just lending money. "If I'm investing," I said, "we'll do it properly. I'll own half." He agreed immediately. I set up the LLC, opened the business account, and put in $10,000 from my savings. We bought a used truck and equipment within a week. I handled the administrative side, invoicing, taxes, client contracts, while Mark ran operations. Within 4 months, the business was profitable. We had 3 part-time employees and steady contracts with property managers around town. Clients liked Mark's work, and I made sure our books stayed clean. Then things started to shift. I noticed expenses that didn't match the invoices, gas receipts for trips that didn't align with job sites. A payment from one client never appeared in our account. When I asked, Mark said, "Oh, they paid cash. I used it to cover supplies." I told him that wasn't how we'd agreed to handle finances. He brushed it off. A week later, I checked our email account and found he'd created a second one, same business name, different domain, and had invoices sent there. Payments from 2 contracts were being redirected to his personal Venmo. When I confronted him, he said, "It's just easier this way. You're overcomplicating things." I told him, "You're stealing from the business." He replied, "You wouldn't even have this business without me." That was the moment I knew it was done. I didn't argue. I just stopped responding to his messages for a few days. I gathered all the documents, registration papers, tax filings, bank records, and scheduled a meeting with our accountant. The LLC, the EIN, and all business assets were in my name. Mark had never filed any ownership transfer paperwork. By the next week, I froze the business account, changed all passwords, and locked him out of the equipment storage unit. He showed up at my house the next day. "You can't just take everything," he said. I told him, "I didn't take anything. I stopped you from taking more." He left angry and told everyone in our family I'd stolen his company. 2 days later, our largest client, the one that paid most consistently, emailed me directly, saying they'd only deal with me from now on. They'd seen the confusion with invoices and didn't want to get involved in family issues. That's where things stood for a while, him out, me rebuilding. Update, 3 months later. I kept the company running under a slightly different name. Hired one of the guys who used to work under Mark full-time. We doubled our monthly contracts. Then last week, Mark texted me for the first time since. It said, "Guess you won." I didn't answer. I didn't win. I just learned not to hand someone a business when they've never had to earn trust first. And now, everything he tried to take, the clients, the brand, the income, is mine again, officially and completely. After Mark's last message, I thought he'd move on. Instead, a few weeks later, my mom called. "You should talk to your brother," she said. "He's struggling." I didn't respond right away. I asked, "What kind of struggling?" She said, "He lost his apartment. Things didn't work out with that new crew he joined." Apparently, he'd tried starting another landscaping business using borrowed equipment from a friend. Within a month, he'd run into unpaid clients, poor reviews, and burned bridges. I kept my answers short. "I hope he figures it out," was all I said. Meanwhile, my company was running smoothly. I'd rebranded, registered a new name, and bought 2 more trucks. We now had 5 employees and a reliable client list. Most of the jobs came from word of mouth. Several were clients Mark had originally found, but who preferred how I handled things. One morning, while I was at a job site checking on a crew, I saw Mark standing across the street. He waited until I got back to my truck before coming over. He said, "Look, I know I messed up. I just need some work, anything." I kept it professional. "We're not hearing right now," I said. He replied, "You're hearing people who don't even know the business like I do." I said, "They know how to follow rules. That's enough." He walked off without another word. A month later, he texted again. This time he asked if I'd rent him one of the small storage units behind my shop for his personal tools. The irony didn't escape me, the same storage units he once accused me of locking him out of. I told him the rental fee and the terms. He agreed immediately. I drew up a simple contract. When he came to sign it, he glanced around the shop and said, "You've really turned this into something." I answered, "I had to." He didn't argue. He signed, handed over the first month's payment, and left quietly. Since then, he's been paying me monthly to keep his tools there. Never late, never a word beyond, thanks. My mom asked if I felt bad. I said no. He wanted independence, I told her. He got it. Now, every time I deposit that check, I remember how he once told me I'd be nothing without him. Turns out, he's the one signing paperwork with my name on it now. Next story. When my dad said, "You'll never make real money selling candles," I told him, "I'm not trying to make real money yet." I was 27 at the time, living in a small apartment outside Columbus, Ohio. I worked part-time at a bookstore and ran a small online shop making soy candles. It started as a side hustle during the pandemic, but by the time I quit my bookstore job, I was making around $2,000 a month. My parents didn't take it seriously. My mom told everyone, "She sells candles on Etsy like it's a career," and my dad joked about me being self-employed until rent's due. They wanted me to go back to school or get a stable job. I didn't argue. I just focused on orders. When a local boutique owner reached out asking if I could make custom candles for her shop, I said yes and spent every weekend hand-pouring wax until 2 a.m. That order led to another, a wedding planner, then a realtor who gave my candles as closing gifts. Within 8 months, I had to rent a small studio space because my apartment smelled like lavender 24/7. I hired one part-time helper, my friend Jenna, to keep up with demand. My parents still made comments. When I told them I signed a wholesale contract with a chain of gift shops, my dad said, "Just don't get too excited. These things don't last." Around that same time, I got offered a full-time marketing position from my old boss at the bookstore. It paid $58K a year with benefits. My parents thought it was a sign. My dad said, "That's the adult choice. You can always do your candle thing on weekends." I told them no. I said, "If I take that job, I'll never know what this business could become." They called me reckless. My mom even said, "Don't expect us to bail you out when it collapses." So I stopped talking about it. Over the next year, I expanded my product line, diffusers, wax melts, and branded gift sets. My online sales doubled, then tripled. I built a small website and started shipping nationwide. By year 3, I was pulling in over $120,000 annually in sales. That's when my parents' situation started to change. My dad's company downsized, and he lost his job after 25 years. My mom's hours at the dental office got cut back. One weekend, they stopped by my warehouse. I'd upgraded from the studio by then. My dad looked around and said, "You're really doing all this?" I said, "Yeah, full time." He didn't say much else, just walked around looking at shelves filled with boxes. A week later, my mom called and asked if I needed help with packaging orders for the holidays. I said yes. She started coming in a few days a week, printing labels and wrapping boxes. She was good at it, fast and precise. A month later, I offered my dad part-time work managing shipments since he was still looking for a new job. He agreed. Neither of them mentioned the jokes anymore. They started referring to my business by its name, not as the candle thing. By the end of that year, both were working for me full-time. And every paycheck they get has my signature at the bottom. I didn't plan on keeping my parents as employees long-term. It just made sense during the busy season. But after the holidays, orders kept growing, and I needed the help. My mom handled all the packaging and customer returns. My dad managed inventory, supplier deliveries, and shipping coordination. They were good at it, and honestly, it made my life easier. At first, they acted like it was temporary. My dad said, "Just until I find something in my field," but months went by and he never mentioned applying anywhere. My mom stopped, too. She told friends she helped run the family business. There wasn't any big talk about how things had flipped. I didn't rub it in. I just treated them like I would any other employees: clear schedules, weekly check-ins, and direct communication. When I implemented payroll software, I added them both like everyone else. My dad asked, "Do I really need to clock in and out?" I said, "Yes, everyone does." He nodded and didn't argue. There were a few awkward moments. One afternoon, my mom asked if she could leave early because she was technically family. I told her, "You still have to finish the order queue." She didn't like that at first, but she adjusted. By the summer, we had 2 more employees and started wholesaling to hotels. My parents worked alongside them every day. No one at the warehouse knew they were my parents at first, and I didn't mention it. One of the new hires found out later and said, "Wait, that's your dad." I said, "Yeah, just keep treating him like anyone else." It wasn't revenge or payback. It just worked out that way. When tax season came, my accountant sent over W-2s for everyone, including my parents. My dad picked his up and said, "Never thought I'd see my kid's name listed as employer." I just said, "Me neither." Now, 2 years later, the business runs smoothly. My parents still work with me, though more on flexible hours. They don't mock what I do anymore. When people ask them what I do, they say, "She runs a successful manufacturing business." And that's true. No big speeches, no apologies, no dramatic turnarounds. Just a quiet shift in who signs the checks and who takes the job seriously now. Next story. When my mother-in-law said, "You don't belong here," I thought she meant temporarily. She didn't. I'm 29 and I married my husband, Mark, last spring. He's 31. We'd been together for 4 years before the wedding. I work as a physical therapist, and he works in construction with his father's company. After we got married, we moved into a large house owned by his parents. It was their old family home, but they had moved to a smaller property nearby. They said we could live there until we get on our feet. We agreed to pay utilities and handle maintenance. At first, everything was fine. Then small things started to shift. His mom began visiting unannounced, usually early mornings or late evenings, with excuses like checking the garden or bringing leftovers. She would rearrange things in the kitchen and say, "That's how I always did it." Mark didn't say much about it. He told me, "She just wants to help." One Saturday, she came by with her sister and started criticizing how I was keeping the house. She said, "This place used to shine when I lived here." Her sister laughed and said, "Different standards, I guess." I didn't answer. A week later, his father told Mark they needed him to come back to the main house for a family discussion. When we got there, both his parents were waiting in the living room. His mom handed me an envelope and said, "We think it's best if you find somewhere else to live. This is our family home." I asked what she meant. She said, "You're not part of this family until you respect it." Mark tried to argue, but his dad said firmly, "We're not changing our minds." We left that night. We stayed in a small apartment downtown that I found through a coworker. I took an extra shift at the clinic to cover expenses. Mark stayed quiet most of the time. I didn't ask him to pick sides. I just focused on getting stable. A few months later, his parents put the old house on the market. Mark mentioned it one night, saying, They're selling for cheap. Dad just wants to unload it. Out of curiosity, I checked the listing online. The price was well below market value, and I noticed the property was being sold under an LLC name, not directly by his parents. At work, one of my long-term patients, a retired real estate investor, heard me talking about it and said, "If it's undervalued, that's an opportunity." That stuck in my head. I talked to him later that week. He offered to partner with me on the purchase if I handled the renovation and management. He said, "You've got a good head for detail. Let's make something out of it." I didn't tell Mark right away. I gathered the paperwork, got pre-approval, and checked zoning rules. Everything lined up. A month later, I put in an offer through the LLC my patient helped me set up. It wasn't under my personal name. Mark's parents accepted it within 2 days. They had no idea who the buyer was. That's where things started to shift again, quietly, but completely. A week after the purchase closed, I arranged for movers to take my belongings into the house. I had secured a small renovation crew to update a few rooms before moving in fully. The plan was to occupy it slowly, keeping the transformation low-key. Mark's parents didn't know the buyer. They assumed it was some investor flipping houses. A neighbor stopped by and asked if we were planning to rent it out. I said, "Just fixing it up first." I moved in gradually, taking my time to repaint walls, replace a few appliances, and add security systems. I made sure all utilities and accounts were transferred to the LLC. One morning, I ran into Mark at a coffee shop. He looked nervous. "You didn't tell them, did you?" he asked. I said, "Not yet. Let them see for themselves." By the time his parents returned from a weekend trip, the renovations were mostly done. I was inside arranging furniture when they pulled up. My husband had gone ahead to get groceries, leaving me to meet them. His mom walked through the front door and froze. "Wait, this is ours," she said. I said, "Not anymore." She looked around, realizing the changes weren't temporary. The security system beeped as she tried to access the main door, and I showed her the new codes. "Everything's set up under the new ownership," I said. His father stepped inside, scanning the living room. "Who?" he started. "The LLC bought the house," I said. "You sold it. Legally, it's mine now." They didn't argue. They left after a brief inspection. I made no comments. Over the next month, I finalized all renovations and started renting out a few rooms as short-term rentals. I maintained full control of the property, paying myself and covering all expenses through the LLC. Mark eventually admitted to me that his parents were cautious about confronting me, knowing I had handled everything by the book. He said, "I guess you really planned this out." I said, "I followed the opportunity when it appeared." Since then, I've managed the house as my own asset. His parents visit occasionally, but always as tenants when they want to see the upgrades, never with the assumption they still own it. No arguments, no confrontations, just a shift in ownership. Every utility bill, maintenance schedule, and rental payment now goes through me. And every time I see the house from the street, I'm reminded that a situation that started with rejection ended with control, fully grounded in the decisions I made. Next story. "Remember me?" one of them asked over Zoom, smiling awkwardly. I didn't. "I'm 33, living in Denver, and I run a small marketing firm I started 8 years ago. 15 years ago, I was a quiet high school student at Eastview High. There were a group of students, mostly juniors and seniors, who made my life difficult. They spread rumors, mocked my clothes, and sometimes blocked me from joining group activities. I kept my head down and focused on school. After graduation, I went to college for marketing, moved to a different city, and kept minimal contact with anyone from my hometown. 2 months ago, I got an email from a regional construction company looking to hire a marketing consultant for a rebranding project. The email came from someone I didn't recognize. I scheduled a call, and that's when I realized who I was talking to. 3 of the former bullies now worked at this company. They were polite on the call. "We heard about your firm and want you to manage our marketing campaign," they said. I paused. I hadn't anticipated working with them, but the project was big enough to cover several months of overhead and bring in new clients for my firm. I emailed Mark, my business partner. "What if I take this project?" He asked, "Aren't you worried it'll be awkward?" I said, "Potentially, but it's a large client. It could make a significant difference for us." The next week, I submitted a proposal outlining the campaign, including website overhaul, social media management, and client outreach. Within days, the company accepted it and signed a contract. When I started the first on-site meeting, I noticed tension. One of them, Laura, tried making a joke about high school drama, but I didn't respond. I presented the campaign plan, deadlines, and deliverables. They looked uncomfortable when I assigned responsibilities. "I can take social media management," Laura said. I said, "Perfect. You'll report to me weekly with analytics and content schedules." Another, Jason, objected. "I've been managing these projects for years. Why am I reporting to you?" I said, "You're managing internal communications. My role is overseeing the campaign." They pushed back again, dismissing some of my suggestions as unnecessary. I held my ground, referred to my data, and implemented the plan exactly as outlined. By the end of the first week, they realized I wasn't negotiating. All tasks and deadlines were set, and the contract stipulated I had final approval on marketing materials. I updated Mark. "They're resisting, but everything is on schedule. My authority is clear in the contract." By the second week, they stopped questioning my decisions and began executing tasks as assigned. They avoided personal topics and stuck to work discussions. It was strange. 15 years later, the dynamics had completely shifted. They were now accountable to me, and I made sure everything stayed professional. By week 3, the workflow had settled. Laura handled social media posts, Jason coordinated internal communications, and the third former bully, Kevin, managed client outreach. I monitored everything from my office, approving content, reviewing emails, and tracking analytics. One morning, Laura emailed me about a new campaign idea. I replied with suggested edits and a timeline. She responded promptly, implementing the changes exactly as requested. Jason tried to negotiate deadlines once, but I referenced the project contract and the agreed-upon schedule. He complied without further comment. Kevin attempted to push back on a client presentation, saying he had a different approach in mind. I scheduled a short call, walked him through my proposal, and confirmed his tasks. After that, he didn't challenge me again. Over the next 2 months, the campaign performed well. Engagement on social media increased by 40%, email open rates doubled, and several leads converted into new clients. My firm billed the company for full services, including a small bonus for performance. Mark commented, "They're actually doing what we outlined. Did you expect them to cooperate this smoothly?" I said, "I didn't expect smooth, I expected professional, and the contract ensures that." One afternoon, Laura mentioned the old high school days. I responded, "We're here to get work done. Let's keep it professional." She nodded, and the topic ended there. By the project's completion, all 3 had submitted weekly reports, met deadlines, and executed campaigns under my supervision. They continued to interact politely, but all authority rested with me. I updated Mark again. Project completed, client happy, my authority respected, not a single missed task. When the final invoice was paid, I allocated the funds to my firm, including profit margins that supported future expansion. My former bullies were employees on the project, reporting to me, executing exactly as directed. It wasn't revenge. It was professionalism backed by clear contracts, deadlines, and accountability. 15 years after high school, the tables had turned, quietly and practically. I was in charge, and every task, report, and deadline reflected that. No confrontation, no drama, just a fully managed campaign where authority and responsibility were clearly mine. Next story. "Where's my rent money?" I asked, holding the envelope. My roommate, Tyler, shrugged and muttered, "I spent it. I'll get it back next week." I'm 27, living in Chicago, working as a project manager at a small software firm. Tyler and I have shared this 2-bedroom apartment for about 8 months. Up until now, our arrangement was simple: split rent, utilities, and groceries evenly. This was the first month he didn't pay his share on time. I reminded him several times over text. Each time, he promised repayment, but nothing changed. I didn't want to escalate things immediately, so I tried to cover the rent myself temporarily while tracking every transaction. A few days later, the landlord called. Rent hadn't been fully paid. I explained the situation and paid Tyler's portion to avoid late fees. I also made sure to document everything: screenshots of our texts, copies of bank transfers, and receipts. Tyler didn't admit wrongdoing. He acted like it was a misunderstanding. "Relax, I'll cover it," he said. I said, "The landlord needs it now, and I need proof you'll reimburse me." Around the same time, I saw a notice from the city about small claims mediation for tenant disputes. That gave me an idea. I could ensure he didn't take advantage of the situation again without involving court or legal filings directly. I contacted the landlord and requested a sublease amendment, specifying that each roommate was individually responsible for their portion of the rent. The landlord agreed to split payments under separate accounts. That way, if one person didn't pay, the other wouldn't be penalized. When I told Tyler about the change, he scoffed. "You don't need to do that." I said, "I do. This protects me and prevents issues like last month." He argued for a while, saying it was unnecessary, but the landlord confirmed the amendment. Tyler reluctantly agreed to pay his half into the separate account. Over the next week, I set up automatic reminders from the bank. Tyler's payment went through on the new schedule. I updated my budget spreadsheet and saved all confirmations. Then I suggested we draft a simple roommate agreement, listing shared expenses, deadlines, and payment methods. Tyler hesitated. I said, "It's just to avoid misunderstandings." He agreed after some pushing. Within 2 weeks, every transaction was documented, and the separate accounts ensured that if Tyler missed a payment, it would be clear who was responsible. He never disputed a single line of the agreement. At that point, I realized the situation was under control. My rent was safe, every payment documented, and Tyler couldn't make excuses. I hadn't involved lawyers or court filings, but the legal framework was in place to protect me. By the end of the month, I had fully covered myself. Rent paid, agreement signed, records saved, and Tyler on notice that I was no longer trusting verbal promises. The next month started smoothly. Tyler deposited his portion into the separate account on time. I checked the transfers daily for the first week, then every few days, confirming everything was on schedule. I updated our spreadsheet to include utilities and groceries. I also added a column for any shared expenses that might come up unexpectedly. Every time Tyler made a payment, I logged it with a timestamp. One morning, Tyler mentioned he wanted to borrow some money for a minor car repair. I said, "I'll lend it, but I need it documented." I drafted a simple IOU, including repayment date, amount, and method. Tyler signed it electronically and returned a copy. By mid-month, he had repaid the loan on time. I recorded it, noting that all previous incidents were resolved. Tyler seemed aware that I wasn't leaving anything to chance anymore. A few weeks later, the landlord called to confirm the upcoming rent. I verified Tyler's payment in the separate account and replied with the confirmation. The landlord thanked me for keeping everything organized. Tyler tried once to delay his payment, citing a bank issue. I reminded him of the agreement, showed the bank confirmation for past months, and set a deadline for him to fix it. He paid on time. By the third month, all payments, including utilities and groceries, were logged and documented. Tyler stopped making excuses or asking for delays. The roommate agreement worked exactly as intended. I updated my budget spreadsheet monthly and sent Tyler a summary of shared expenses. He acknowledged each summary without objection. Any attempt to skip payments was prevented because the framework was already in place. At this point, the situation was fully under control. I had implemented a system where Tyler's ability to avoid responsibility no longer existed. Rent was safe, every shared expense accounted for, and my legal and financial position was secure without going to court. Everything remained practical and organized. The initial problem of stolen rent money was resolved, and Tyler learned that I was prepared and methodical. My payments were protected, my records complete, and the household ran smoothly under the new system.